Good morning, everyone. My name is Gaikwad Rishikesh Trembak, and I am going to talk about literary criticism. Here I am going to share my PPT. Literary criticism is the study, evaluation, and interpretation of literature. Modern literary, modern literary criticism is often influenced by literary theory, which is the philosophical discussion of literary goals and methods. Literary criticism is often published in essay or book form. Uh, Let me see its history. Classical and medieval criticism. Literary criticism is thought to have existed as far back as the classical period, the 4th century. Aristotle wrote the Poetics, a typology and description of literary forms, with many specific criticism of contemporary works of art. Poetics developed for the first time the concepts of mimesis and catharsis, which are still crucial in literary studies. Plato attacks on poetry as imitative, secondary, and false were formative as well. The Sanskrit Natya Shastra includes literary criticism on ancient Indian literature and Sanskrit drama. Later classical and medieval criticism often focused on religious texts, and the several long religious traditions of hermeneutics and textual have had a profound influence on the study of secular text. And then we see Renaissance criticism. The literary criticism of the Renaissance developed classical ideas of unity of form and content into literary neoclassicism, proclaiming literature as central of culture, entrusting the poet and the author with preservation of a long literary tradition. The birth of Renaissance criticism was in 1498 with the recovery of classical text, most notably Giorgio Villa's Latin translation of Aristotle's Poetics. The work of Aristotle, especially Poetics, was the most important influence upon literary criticism until the late 19th century. Ludovico Costolverto was one of the most influential Renaissance critics who wrote commentaries on Aristotle's Poetics. Then we see Enlightenment criticism. In the Enlightenment period, literary criticism became more popular during this time. Literacy rates started to rise in the public. No longer was reading exclusively for the wealthy or scholarly. With the rise of literate public, the swiftness of printing and commercialization of literature, criticism arose too. Reading was no longer viewed solely as educational or as a scared source of religion. It was a form of entertainment. 19th century romantic criticism. The British romantic movement of early 19th century introduced was aesthetic ideas of literary studies, including the idea that the object of literature need not always be beautiful, noble, or perfect, but that literature itself could evaluate a common subject of the level of sublime. German Romanticism, which followed closely after the late development of German classicism, emphasizes an aesthetic of fragmentation that can appear startlingly modern to the reader of English literature. Then we see new criticism. However important all these aesthetic movements were as antecedents, current ideas about literary criticism derived almost entirely from the new direction taken in the early 20th century. Early in the century, the school of criticism known as Russian formalism and slightly later new criticism in British and in the United States came down to dominate the study of discussion of literature in the English speaking world. Both schools emphasized the closely reading of text, evaluating it for above generalizing discussion and speculations about either authorial intention or reader response. This emphasis on form and precise attention to the words themselves has persisted after the decline of these critical doctrines themselves. In 1957, Norby Fry published The Influence Autonomy of Criticism. In his work, Fry noted that some critics tend to embrace an ideology and to judge literary pieces on their basis of their adherence to such ideologies. So this is my seminar. Thank you.